U.S. forces are racing to evacuate thousands of Americans and Afghan allies from Afghanistan. Earlier today, the Taliban violently dispersed a protest in eastern Afghanistan, killing at least one person and leaving others injured. This comes as CBS News has now learned U.S. intelligence warned over the spring and summer that Afghanistan could struggle to withstand the Taliban. We've also now learned the whereabouts of former Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. He is in the United Arab Emirates with his family now that the Taliban has taken control. CBS News' Natalie Brand reports from the White House.
The U.S. is rushing to increase the number of people it can evacuate from Afghanistan ahead of the August 31st withdrawal deadline.
We predict that our best effort could look like 5,000 to 9,000 passengers departing per day.
But there are reports of chaos outside the Kabul airport, with a NATO official telling Reuters there was a stampede at one of the gates, and the Taliban is reportedly blocking Afghan citizens from leaving.
We have received reports of people being turned away or pushed back or even beaten. We are taking that up in a channel with the Taliban to try to resolve those issues.
In the eastern city of Jalalabad, a health official says at least one person is dead after Taliban soldiers fired into a crowd protesting against the new government. National intelligence analysts say there is also concern about heightened terrorist threats, especially around the 20th anniversary of 9/11.
Anybody in the intelligence business right now here in the United States who doesn't understand we're in a heightened threat position isn't reading the analysis.
The Taliban held its first press conference Tuesday, claiming it will respect women's rights. The U.S. joined 46 other countries in a statement saying, "We are deeply worried about Afghan women and girls, their rights to education, work, and freedom of movement."
We have to see what they do. We hear what they're saying, but it is their actions that really will define how they address these issues moving forward.
The UN says it will remain on the ground in Afghanistan to support programs for women and girls. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
For more on this, I want to bring in Marcus Weisgerber. He is a global business editor for Defense One. Marcus, welcome. So this morning, we saw the Taliban violently break up a protest. The group has insisted that it will not impose the same restrictions as when it last ruled, sort of presenting itself as a reformed Taliban. But could this be a sign that the Taliban has indeed not changed?
Well, I think you had Mitch McConnell on right before I came on, and he kind of said, only time will tell. As has been said by numerous people, the Taliban's actions in the past have shown that, only time will tell whether or not the Taliban's actions have changed. What we do know is that they are blocking the airport right now. They're providing security, if you will, and residents and people who are trying to evacuate to get to those military flights that are taking people out of Afghanistan. They have to get through these Taliban checkpoints, and there are plenty of reports of them being unable to do so.
Right. So tell us what's the latest you're hearing about that? Because, of course, as you just mentioned, U.S. forces are still rushing to evacuate those thousands of Americans and Afghan allies that are still in the country. So what is the latest specifically on these efforts? And do we have a sense of exactly how many Americans are still there?
So I'm just going to look down at my notes because the Pentagon just briefed this morning on this. In the past 24 hours, 18 C-17s carrying some 2,000 people were flown out of Afghanistan. Now, that is far below what the Pentagon has said it wants to do. It said it wants to move between 5,000 and 9,000 people per day. Now, if you just do some basic math there, that's far fewer people on these planes than, say, were moved the other night when we saw, hundreds, in case of one flight, some 640 Afghan nationals being moved out of the country. So there are believed to be thousands of people, both Americans, and then you have that kind of unknown number, if you will, of Afghans who have applied for these special visas to get into the United States.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that specific flight that you mentioned in just a moment. But first, I want to see what you know about the stampede at the Kabul airport this morning, which we understand injured at least 17 people. Is there any more information about the current situation at the airport?
Not that I personally have, but as I mentioned, that people as you've seen throughout the last few days, people are desperate to get out. I don't think anyone imagined seeing people, hanging on planes as we saw the other day, hanging onto the side of a plane because that's the best option that they had. So again, very, very, very dramatic situation there outside of the airport. And the U.S. has about 4,500 troops, it says, on the ground right now. It has the capability in the region to go higher, but right now they believe that is enough. And the military side of the airfield, where these evacuation flights, not just by the U.S., by a number of other countries, India, Turkey, the U.K., France, Germany, also taking off from Kabul right now.
Okay, so you referenced that dramatic flight. I believe there's a widely shared photo of it showing a U.S. C-17 flight packed with over 600 Afghans. I believe you said it was 640 trying to get out of the country. You have more reporting on this. What are you learning?
So the other night, my colleague and I, we photo and we talked, kind of walked us through this. Basically, the plane went in and it got rushed, and basically the crew just made a decision. It said, these people have all been cleared. Let's just get them on and get as many people on as we can. It's believed to be the second largest passenger flight ever in a C-17, the largest coming in 2013 when the U.S. Air Force evacuated Typhoon refugees in the Philippines. They used a method called floor loading, which basically is sitting on the floor, and there are cargo straps run from wall to wall in the plane that kind of serve as makeshift seatbelts. So definitely not the way you and I have flown in the past. But as a number of Air Force officials have told me, pilots who have flown the C-17, it is in the manual and it is safe. But as you see, I mean, the picture is dramatic. We'll be seeing this picture for decades to come.
Absolutely. And do you know where that plane was headed?
Sure. So the plane took off from Kabul and it flew to Qatar, to a military base there, Al Udeid. It's just outside of Doha, and that's where a lot of the processing has been going on and the transferring of these folks to other flights elsewhere.
And I guess those people, those over 600, mostly Afghans, but I imagine there are probably some Americans on that flight as well, probably feel like the lucky ones.
Oh, sure. I mean, there have been other photos that have come out since. I mean, this is something the U.S. Air Force does all the time. Humanitarian evacuation is something that, it's very, very good at. In this case, a number of the flight crew that we saw, they actually brought toys for kids, anticipating that there'd be children to help, comfort them. And, a mission that will continue, into the coming days up until as we count down to the end of the month when this is all supposed to be done.
And do we have more details about exactly who those people are on the flight? You said they'd already been cleared, which is one of the reasons the pilots just made the decision to leave. So were those the Afghans with the special visas? Were they, Americans coming out of the embassy? Do we have any more information on that?
Right. It's believed to be a combination of the two, Afghans who have done work for the U.S. military and their families. So people who have worked with the U.S. government over the past, 20 years that, the United States has been there. Till now.
Right. All right. Well, Marcus Weisgerber from Defense One, thank you so much for joining us. That is a dramatic picture, as you said, that people will not forget anytime soon.
Thank you for having me.